Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. The Paragon Remake Wars continue, and it is a friggin' mess right now. So, just, I guess, to bullet point everything we're going to talk about. Obviously, Fault, it's done, closed out, it's over with. And so, Predecessor and Overprime, Paragon the Overprime, but we'll just refer to it as Overprime for now. They both just entered early access, and there's really people on both sides of this thing who are disappointed, and we'll get into that. Early access predecessor has a paywall to get into, and then Overprime is free. But it's like an astronomical cost to get any of the heroes. So anyway, first things first, Fault, which was the first of the Paragon remakes to make its way into live gameplay without an invite. It's officially been closed for a little bit now. We can see by probably these negative comments are people dead and never got my money back. Okay, first comment right here. Same thing with me. I bought when this first launched, I bought the $60 pack for it. The devs have been like radio silence since they essentially did that last stream and announced that the game is over with. We don't know what's going on with them. They're people too. This venture was probably, I would say, the smallest of all the studios from what I gather. But Fault never got off the ground. There were people who liked it. But no one wants to call their baby ugly. This thing played like it was just janky. I couldn't get into it. It was so janky. So I think that they probably entered gameplay a little bit too early, and they constantly probably had to focus on player feedback versus getting something that's playable. Now the other two are very much playable. They both have a ton of work to do. But let's start off with Predecessor, since Predecessor was the first one that went into early access. Now, both Predecessor and Overprime both had closed beta tests, and Overprime had a couple of open beta tests. Now, Predecessor, if you looked at it at face value, this is the one that you heard a lot of strong opinions about in the community as far as being closer to the Paragon remake. Out of the three, they're like, this is the one that's like, it plays well, it's the closest to Paragon, etc., etc. So this was the one that a lot of people were really looking forward to. It's described as a free-to-play game, but you have to pay for this $20 bundle, which right now it's 50% off, so it's $10 in the United States. You have to pay for this bundle to actually try early access. Now, the way that they're able to say it's a free-to-play game, but they're making you pay $10 is because it's in early access. Well, you're paying $10 to be able to enter early access, basically. A lot of people are not happy about that. I mean, there are people just absolutely tearing them up on social media, which, by the way, they have a really good social media presence. And the refunds for this thing are like, the percentage of refunds are really high. And a lot of that has to do with, I think that a lot of people, they thought they were being sold a bill of goods on this game that didn't deliver. Now, I'm not saying that this game is better or worse than Overprime. My preference, and everybody who listens to me knows my preference right now is Overprime. But it's my preference. I have a few issues with Predecessor that prevent me from really wanting to play it. Namely, that each hero has a passive. And everybody's like, this is the closest thing to Paragon. I mean, that might be with the lack of travel mode, the jungle. I love the jungle in Predecessor, by the way. But each hero having a passive makes it completely different than Paragon. It completely changes the dynamics of the entire game. So it's really difficult for me to honestly say, like, yeah, this is the closest thing to Paragon. Anyway, so there's a paywall to get into it. So you would automatically expect that there's going to be less players. And the crazy thing is that this game it's bleeding concurrent players. Now, this game Predecessor is developed in the UK. So let's do UK time now. So if we're thinking about the region, like they should be at peak right now for it being a Friday. They'll probably get more players later because North America's the one who is really pulling this game. But they should be at peak right now because it's like the middle of the day, essentially, daylight wise, in the UK, which is where this is developed. Their numbers are pretty abysmal, and they had a decent peak up front, but they've been pulling pretty bad numbers. Last night when I was playing Overprime, this game was below 1,000, so their numbers are dwindling bad. When you think of like 800 players on Steam, which is the largest digital distributor on PC, that's not good, especially for matchmaking. Now let's look at the historicals here. That's actually Overprime. Here's Predecessor. Okay, so we have that number, which is the current 1410. And then this is the 24-hour peak, which actually is pretty good. Not too bad. And then the all-time peak. So this is the highest number of players that this game has received so far. And it's going down. You cannot... It doesn't... I understand this is on the Epic Store, but you cannot have a successful MOBA or multiplayer game this close to launch where this is your peak and now, like, this is the current player base. Because what are you going to do to get an influx of players? So this is an issue. All right. So let's get into Overprime. Now, Overprime it's not exactly the opposite problem, but Overprime has a pretty good problem as well. And that's that, yes, it's free to get into I don't know why I typed store. It's free to get into the game. But as far as I can tell, there isn't a hero rotation. It's like these are the heroes that are playable with the free version of the game. And then it costs about $10 real life for each additional hero. Couple of caveats there. One is they're giving you free heroes every day that you log in. They're giving you a free hero out of a set amount, a set selection. So that's one. So you get a couple of free heroes there. And then the other side of it is technically you can buy heroes just by playing the game and doing quests and getting gold. But the amount of gold it takes to buy a hero versus the amount you get for completing quests it's basically like a mobile game where they're saying, oh, it's not pay to win. You can play the game and you have to invest like thousands of hours versus someone who just pays $20. So that's a big issue. But on both fronts, something we have to understand. And by the way, that's making this game get review bombed. And so if we look at most of the reviews, well, I would say, okay, I mean, there's people who are going to troll this. So, and this is the thing about a free-to-play game. Anybody can leave a review, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But I would say a lot of the legitimate complaints is that basically it's astronomical to get any sort of hero on here. That's what I would say are the majority of the legitimate complaints about this game. And oh yeah, the other one, this was the crazy one too, is that the TOS, they can take your browsing history. Hang on a sec, sorry. Sorry about that. Anyway, I think someone, can you get out of here? Anyway, so, all right, so that was the other thing is that they're saying that in the TOS, they can track your browsing data. Dog's going crazy because I think that there was a package dropped off or something. Anyway, so those are a couple of the gripes, and they're both legitimate complaints. So for me right now, Paragon the Overprime is definitely where I'm invested, and the people I play with are invested right now. I did give Predecessor a shot. It just wasn't for me. I had a lot of issues with it. It was very clear to me that it was further it wasn't as far down the line of development as Overprime. It felt very underdeveloped. And I know a lot of people are going to argue with me about that because Overprime still has some stutters and performance issues. But as far as the cohesion of all the systems as a whole in the game, Overprime just feels a lot more complete. The other issue that I have with Predecessor is that I don't know what it is with the character models. It's not like the character models are bad, but in game, I play at 4K, and it's like I don't know if they don't have the full textures drawing in at 4K or what the deal is, but the character models just look really bad in 4K in game on Predecessor. And I mean, I just kind of confirmed that by going into Overprime, and I try to check myself to make sure I'm not being biased. But no, it's very clear to me that something is wrong with the resolution of the characters in game in Predecessor. So those two kind of things I could look past, but the straw that kind of broke the camel's back for me for Predecessor, not Overprime, is that they gave all the heroes a passive ability, which is fine if you like that. I mean, hey, look, they didn't just make this game for me. They made this game for many people to play. But like a couple of really good examples of how these passives just are going to be very difficult to balance. Gideon's passive, it's absolutely absurd. After he casts a spell, his basic attacks attach like a damage over time to you that does a percentage of damage based off of your magical power. Like, how in the hell does that make sense that a magic user now innately, not with investing gold and time and farm, but innately gets carry level basic attacks? I mean, yeah, maybe they don't have the attack speed of a carry, but it defeats the entire purpose of having a mage. A mage is burst damage, it can be AoE, some sort of utility, and then once they blow their magical kit mage, they're effed until something comes on cooldown. That's the point of a mage, is they can dump a ton of abilities, utility, etc. in a short amount of time, and then they got cooldown, and they're also limited to their mana. That is what makes a mage in any MOBA. A carry, or a hunter, a ranger, they do fast, ranged, basic attack damage. It does not cost them any mana, at the detriment of being squishy, having lower utility, and not having abilities that do a ton of damage. And so this game, for the people who complain about Overprime not having clear defined roles as far as people playing tanks in solo lane, people playing mages in middle lane, and the carry and support dynamic, Predecessor completely undermines that with the passives. Let me give you another example. It's so frustrating. Chimera. So if you know about Chimera, you know that Chimera's main shtick is that when Chimera lands a basic attack, Chimera, one of their abilities, which is a passive on the hotbar, they get a stack of health regen every time they land a basic attack. The amount of regen they get increases a little bit until it caps out at a certain amount, whether it's 10 stacks, however many stacks. So it's X amount of healing per second. And so Chimera is really good at jungling because Chimera has a built-in sustain that's really good. And Chimera is great at one-on-one, except in the cases that the Chimera gets hard crowd controlled. And that is what breaks that regen stack. Because if you don't refresh the stack every 2 or 3 seconds, depending on what game we're talking about, then you lose all the stacks and they start over. So the counter to a Chimera has always been a hard crowd control. Every hero has to have a counter. They can't, if they're incredibly broken to the point that they don't have a counter, then everybody would just play that person, that hero. So with Chimera, the counter is you hard crowd control Chimera. Then he loses all of his tankiness right there on the spot, and you kill him. Done. Okay, so Chimera's passive in Predecessor is his health regen. They took it off the hotbar. It's now just a passive because every hero has a passive now. And they added in basically a purification ability that the last time I checked had an 8 to 12 second cooldown. Like, what the hell? It makes you immune to crowd control. And it's like, this is the whole. If you, as a Chimera, want purification, you need to invest gold in it by farming and buying that gold and making the decision, do I want more damage? Do I want more sustain? Do I want more attack speed? Do I want more tankiness? Or do I want to buy this thing that's going to allow me to have purification? And on top of that, purification is not and we'll call it a 12-second cooldown. Purification is not a 12-second cooldown. Purification is like 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 120 seconds. So Chimera, completely broken. And then every hero has a passive. I don't know all of them off the top of my head. So just to compare a couple of casters, Gideon and the Fae. We talked about Gideon. The Fae, hers are when she lands magical abilities or something like that, she drops little sprouts on the ground and they increase her movement speed incrementally. How does that compare to Gideon having basic attacks that are doing magical damage over time? You could kill a Gideon, and if he hits you with a basic, and you're like 30% health, there's a good chance if you're not a tank, you're going to die. It's weird. It's a weird thing. Look, it's fine if you like it. If you think it's cool and you like it and you think it adds a new dynamic, and you could even go to the point of heroes shouldn't have passives on their hotbar. Okay, that's fine. It's not for me. And at the minimum, let's not call Predecessor a Paragon successor, because it's not with the passives. It completely undermines the fact that each hero has kind of what they're good at and how to counter them. Okay, Overprime. Since I just shat all over Predecessor, the issues with Overprime are less, in my opinion. Overprime is much more fun to play. It's much more fun to get into. Obviously, there's a snowballing issue. This is the number one thing that people complain about. It's more, whenever we're playing a MOBA that's a 3-lane style game, we always say it's not TDM, it's like lane control, pushing towers. And Overprime, you still do have to push lanes and you have to get towers. You do. But it's more TDM than it should be. And that's like what a lot of people are complaining about. And it's true. The fights happen frequently and a lot, and people chase, and they'll chase constantly. When you get snowballed, people will chase on, even without lane control, on the opposite side of the jungle to the enemy territory, and there's no repercussions most of the time. And so this is the issue with Overprime. But my whole thing is, if that's like my biggest issue with Overprime versus Predecessor, I knew from the beginning, the first time I played Overprime, that they had work to do, but I thought they had really good fundamentals to make balance changes, because in the first closed beta test, everybody was playing carry everywhere. Jungle carry, mid lane carry. I mean, they were just freaking broken. And they were tanky. And they're still a little too tanky, by the way, in Overprime. But I was like, okay, that's a balance change. They have the fundamentals. The game plays pretty well. There's some stability issues that should be able to get ironed out, but they have like a good thing going. For me, the only way that I'm really gonna be able to get into Predecessor, and I know there's people who share this opinion, is if they removed those passives. Everything else could be worked on, but I just don't see them completely changing all of those passives and then changing all the abilities It's done. It's already set in stone and done. If we look at the concurrent player count of Overprime right now, it's close to 20,000. Now, look, you could say it's because it's a free to play game, and that's probably to some degree true. The other game's $10. So $10 free to play. If someone really wants to play this game for $10, they'll pay it. The reality is, and we've all known this from the beginning, with the big three, Fault, aka Core, Predecessor, Overprime, when the dust settles and everything's said and done, only one was going to last the test of time. Guys, it's happening right now. So, Predecessor, all-time peak, 7K. They've got to raise this number. If they do not raise this number, this game is not going to go anywhere. 7K, it's got to be, let's see. Back it up. It's the 7K is going to be at launch right here. So we don't get anywhere close to that, which is pretty typical of any game. It's always at the launch, it's always going to have its highest peak. So Overprime, let's see, where's the 32K? So there's your peak right there, which is right after launch. This would be the morning of, well, actually, I don't know what time zone this is in, but if we have, okay, so we can assume that, yeah, this is probably in my time zone then. So this here is the morning in North America, is where the peak is, which is probably like where the peak for both of these games is going to come from, is in the peak time in North America. Because look, this is a KST game. It's made in Eastern Asia. It's, well, 1 a.m. now. Yeah, so 1:22 a.m. They're asleep right now in that side of the world. And the game is still currently at 21,000 with the 25,000 player peak, which happened probably last night, my time. Let's see. Yeah. No, this morning, actually. Wow. Anyway, so it's not good. It's not looking good for Predecessor right now. It is what it is. Look, if their all-time peak is 7K, we can at least maybe double that number in sales. So 14,000. And even on the low end, we'll say $10 packs, which there's plenty of people who bought the higher end packs. We'll call it $140,000 US. Now, out of that, how many, because this is the peak and there were a lot of refunds, how many were refunds? We don't know. But we'll just give them the benefit of the doubt and say 14,000 is the current sales. We'll say, well, at least on Steam, we're not counting Epic. Now, keep in mind, Epic's numbers are not going to pull the same as Steam. Steam is the largest digital game distributor on PC. So we'll just call it 14,000. At a minimum, $140,000 gross. Throw in probably, I would say 5% or less bought the highest end pack. And then maybe like 10 to 15% bought the middle pack. So between $150,000 and $200,000 is what they've made off this game so far. That's not enough. That's not enough for a game like this, for a live service game. So this game has to grow if it wants to survive. Now, there's no real way to pull numbers out of our ass like we did for Predecessor for Overprime, because the issue is it's a free to play game. Now, interestingly enough, the largest revenue stream from or on PC is from free-to-play games, from optional purchases in free-to-play games. With that, it's really difficult to say that applies across the board, because you have a few juggernauts in that space. You have Fortnite, you have Apex, you have Warzone, you have a ton of free-to-play MOBAs and MMOs on PC that aren't on consoles. So there's a pretty big stretch of games that are free to play that have massive player counts. But with that said, right now, except for, I think, the really hardcore players, I don't think hardly anyone's spending money on Overprime because the prices are just a little bit too high. $10 a hero is too much. Hey, skins, go for it. Heroes are gameplay. Like, and I've heard from people who are on the inside that this is going to be corrected. As far as the $10 per hero thing, look, they need a god pack. They need something like every other freaking MOBA that's ever existed. A god pack. They need bundles in rotation that you can buy. They need something. $10 a hero is not. That's not good. If you have 50 heroes, that's $500 just to own the roster. No. So that's got to be fixed. Anyway, as of right now, predictions are Predecessor is not going to make it. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. And there's going to be some really pissy people. But the reality is, regardless of how compelled you are on which one is better gameplay wise, it all comes down to the money and the concurrent player base. If you don't have enough players to match make, then the game is very quickly going to go under because people are not going to sit in a lobby for 5, 6, 7 minutes waiting on a match to get filled. Anyway, that's your Paragon Remake news. Let me know what you think in the comments. Kind of a long video, but it's pretty important if you're in the Paragon space. And obviously, like right now, there's almost 30,000 people just on Steam playing Paragon Remakes. Epic, we'll call it, 20% of that. So you've got over 30,000 people playing right now. That's concurrent. And so when we look at all the time zones, it's like 50,000, 60,000 players, maybe. I don't know. A lot of players who are actively playing these games. But let me know what you guys think of each game in the comments below. Appreciate it. Like, subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching.